Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, a Ukrainian American reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 196 of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is the second week of December 2025. In today's podcast, US Russian negotiations are at the full swing without European and Ukrainian sides knowing. And Russia is happy with massive US pressure on Ukraine. President Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner are recently trying to end the bloodshed in Ukraine, but they are far from succeeding. And they will not succeed as long as they naively believe this is just a big real estate deal and that their past experience gives them a special advantage. This is a completely absurd from every point of view, said at his article journalist Thomas Friedman. To begin with, yes, one could say that Vladimir Putin is indeed involved in real estate in Ukraine, but not in the same way as Donald Trump and Witkoff or Kushner were involved. Putin's involvement in Ukrainian real estate is similar to how Hitler was involved in real estate in Poland. Hitler didn't seek to acquire territories to build hotels or housing for profit and the local population's benefit. He wanted them to fulfill his nationalist dreams. Putin is actually similar. He doesn't care about the well being of the Ukrainian population. In such a situation, a handful of real estate specialties, in quotes, as American negotiators are not an advantage but a hindrance. A hindrance. What is needed is a statement of the caliber of Henry Kissinger or James Baker, a person who understands the difference between real estate and war at peace. War and peace. Real estate is a positive sum game. In a successful deal, both sides can win, and that should be the goal. But in war and peace, when one side is fascist and the obvious aggressor, and the other is democratic and the clear victim, you are dealing with a zero sum game. Or, as Ronald Reagan once brilliantly said when asked how the Cold War should end, we win, they lose. Ronald Reagan understood perfectly well that real estate deals are about value, price per square foot, and interest rates. He knew that agreements about war and peace are about upholding and defending moral values and strategic interests. On the issues, there is no room for compromise with a fascist aggressor. We fought three wars, including the Cold War, alongside our European allies to protect the spread of our shared democratic values and our common interest. Specifically, that no great power in Europe that doesn't share this value should be able to dominate the continent. It's hard to remember any American president who has behaved as if America's values and interests required us to know to now act as a neutral arbiter between Russia and Ukraine, and an arbiter who seeks to benefit and profit from both sides, as Donald Trump is currently doing. This is one of the most shameful episodes in the history of American foreign policy, and the entire Republican Party bears responsibility for its continuation. We also can't think of any other US State Department officials who has said about Putin that Witkoff has said about this dictator whose political rivals often end up dead, who is mired in massive corruption with his inner circle and who is doing everything he can to undermine free and fair elections in the US and the West. I don't think Putin is a bad guy, he said. But, as Thomas Friedman wrote last month, there is a vast difference between a dirty deal that maximizes Putin's interest, his profits, and the ability to restart the war at will, and simply a dirty deal. A dirty deal would allow Putin to keep the territory he has already stolen, but with Western military forces in Ukraine to ensure that he can never start the war again, except by going to war with the entire West. It would ensure that the illegally seized lands would not be legitimized diplomatically and would not set a precedent for encouraging the conquest of territory by force. It would allow Ukraine to maintain an army of any size necessary for its own defense and to become a member of European Union, through, though not NATO, when it's ready. Such a dirty deal would secure key Ukrainian and American interests and values. Vice, the US Vice President G.D. Vance, isolationist, argued, we have no way of getting Putin to do that kind of dirty deal, and we don't want a nuclear war with Russia. Thank you very much. But the reason you can't get Putin to do that is that you don't know what you're doing. And your president is jumping from one side to another, making policy on his social media and then forcing the Pentagon and the State Department to adjust it to the real time. There is no policy making process, and it seems like we have at least five people serving as the Secretary of State: Witkoff, Kushner, Pence, Secretary of the Army Daniel Driscoll, and some guy who formerly holds that title, Marco Rubio. What would any normal American president do right now? He will start by understanding that negotiations in any field, whether real estate or geopolitics, are always decided by one factor: leverage. Whether you are buying a hotel or trying to stop an invasion, you need maximum leverage to protect your interest, your values best, and get the best deal possible. In real estate, leverage is measured by the amount of money you can bring to bear. In diplomacy, leverage is measured by the scale of military power a side can bring to bear on the battlefield, the degree of economic isolation and damage it can inflict on its adversary, and finally, the ability to influence public opinion in the opposing country to persuade its leadership to change policy. And what did Donald Trump do this on these metrics? He stopped all US funding for Ukraine's purchase of American weapons. He denied it access to critical weapon systems, such as Tomahawk cruise missiles, that could actually hit Putin at home. And the Europeans were willing to pay for it, by the way. And he brazenly lied that Ukraine, not Russia, started the war, and that the Ukrainian leader, not the Russian one, was the illegitimate dictator. He also told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky quite openly that without American help, you have no cards in this fight against Russia. What if Trump had behaved like a proper American president, acting in accordance with American interests and values? He would not have told the courageous Ukrainians that they had no cars. He would have dealt with cars himself to strengthen their position while loudly declaring to the Russian people that they had no future because Vladimir Putin had stolen all the cars from them. So all the pressure that Ukraine has from the United States was met with big enthusiasm in Russia. A few days ago, a new national security strategy was solemnly presented in Washington. Ukrainian media reacted emotionally to any mentions of Ukraine. Indeed, it's difficult to contain emotions when a document that should say Russia full scale aggression contains the need, as if from a literally circle wording of Ukrainian war, a kind of diplomatic grooming of tragedy. Ukrainian war, as a factor of instability, is no longer just a phonism. It is a trick in which the aggressor disappears, and the victim remains guilty only because he exists. Of course, The general phrase, it should be completed promptly, sounds like if we are talking about kitchen renovations and not about the biggest war of the 21st century. It is no surprise that this rhetoric received enthusiasm in Moscow. Dmitry Medvedev, the Kremlin's regular jester, even managed to praise the United States, saying that the ship had decided to change its course. Kremlin spokesman Peskov was not far behind. The strategy, he says, has a wording against confrontation, and therefore it is possible to adopt the mask of a constructive partner again. But the problem is deeper than these cheap remarks. Before us is a document that defines the contours of the world for several years to come. In these contours, America seemed to have tired of this role of the architect of the global order and has decided to try itself in a new role, a small state that lives by its own petty interest and doesn't seek to be concerned with other people's strategies. Europe is mercilessly criticized in the document. Instead of the traditional image of a partner from a democratic community, Europe appears in Trump's strategy as a region experiencing political decline. NATO expansion is considered undesirable, and the US role in European security is excessive. Thus, Washington hints that it doesn't guarantee the European Union's protection in the event of real danger. And the danger, by the way, is real. And the Kremlin reminds us almost every day, now with drones, now with blackmail, now with another pathetic nonsense. If it seems to you that Europe is entering a dangerous area, then you don't think so. After all, where America leaves a vacuum, Russia traditionally puts its foot down to put its boot. Behind the dirty formulation of the strategy lies a very real European thriller of the day after tomorrow. Little green men crawling like cockroaches in the corridor of power, basements with torture chambers in suburban areas, destroyed towns from which Christmas markets are broadcast in normal times. Ukraine knows this picture better than any analyst from Washington. We have seen it up close. A few words about our future in the geopolitical contest. There are periods in the lives of people and states when tomorrow is a very blur. For example, a cadet doesn't know what score he will get on the test tomorrow, but he feels well that he can pass the training course. Today, Ukraine is in exactly the same state. What will happen tomorrow? Will there be a pause in the hot phase of the war? When can this happen? There are many predictions, which means that there is no definite knowledge. But the day after tomorrow is already emerging. In a world where the old rules were destroyed by the authors of these rules themselves, and the declared security strategy is more like a strategic retreat on all fronts. Those who are able to stand on the battlefield will win. Well, instead of today's world order, a new one will be created the day after tomorrow. It is born where Ukraine stands. The new world order will emerge from the trenches, from stubbornness, from refusal to accept the role of victim. In this day after tomorrow, we're not supplicants, but scriptwriters of history, because Russia is doomed in the long run. The collective West is confused, and we have the most important thing: strength, experience in modern warfare, and the willingness to fight. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, share with your friends.